Welcome to Bluejay Coders, Building Relationships Through Coding. I'm Nikki Farler. I'm in my 13th year of teaching in the Perry County schools. I primarily teach kindergarten through second grade while also teaching students with moderate to severe disabilities. Since we don't have a primarily unit-based, the students with severe to moderate disabilities in our school are, for most of the part, mainstreamed for a good portion of the day, and then in a resource setting after that. This is my school. Welcome to Robinson Elementary. Robinson Elementary is located in Erie, Kentucky, and we have approximately 300 students preschool to 8th grade. Since the pandemic, just like every other school in the Commonwealth, we have fluctuated between complete virtual instruction, then more of a hybrid model where we had Mondays were virtual and then the rest of the week were in person, and then some students were virtual. When we came back in 2021, the 2021-2022 school year, we attempted to go completely in person. And then a month or 6 weeks into the school year, we shifted to a virtual academy model with our moderate to severe students being virtual with their teachers. So I had students in person, virtual, and in the virtual academy. Let's talk about our grant. Bluejay coding. Transitioning from a virtual setting to an in-person setting has been a struggle for students with moderate to severe disabilities. Before the pandemic, when we were in person and focusing on our goals and our objectives, a big portion of that with these students is social interaction and how to properly social interact, and using the rules and social groups to be able to encourage them to socially interact in a positive way with their same age peers. But social skills and adaptive instruction was very difficult during the virtual time. And as we had the virtual academy and as I had my students online, it became very apparent, despite wonderful work from their parents and a great team in the Perry County schools and here at Robinson, we still weren't making the social and mostly social progress that we would like our students to make. And beyond that, our students' social emotional health has really been impacted due to the pandemic. The regular anxiety about coming to school for these students that have a baseline of anxiety due to the pandemic has really increased and added worries that they previously didn't have before. I have students whose caregivers were grandmothers and grandfathers, and the fear that they were going to bring home a little germ, we had this conversation, a little germ that could hurt their grandparents was terrifying for some of our students. And we had two students actually who were so hyper-focused on that ended up having to transfer to a more virtual option. So, question that we wanted to research with this: how can we increase social interactions with moderate to severe students, while increasing the STEM education among our lower primary students? We are a small school with limited resources, though in the past several years with the Perry Promise Grant that's been in our school system, we have had more access to STEM-related activities and being able to expose our students to STEM and engineering and coding. Here was my plan of action. Working with the Robot Lego students or the Robinson Robotics Club, our students with moderate to severe disabilities will be assisted in learning to operate coding materials that the grant provided, and we'll show you just a second what was provided. Their partners will then introduce these coding activities to small groups in our kindergarten classes. And actually, as the year went on, this expanded to all of lower primary. We had small groups in kindergarten, first and second. So, for grant budget, you can see here we did RD 2000, RD 3000, excuse me, had 2 of those. The Dash Wonder voice activated robot is still on back order, so we didn't end up with that. It's still on back order. I'm still getting those messages, so fingers crossed for something for next year. We also had 1 iPad, but on a previous grant, I had iPads purchased. So, excuse me, let me make myself a little bit bigger. I had iPads purchased, so we really used 3 iPads for this grant. We also used the Osmos Genius Starter Kit as well as the Osmos Coding Starter Kit. So, and then we also used the Osmos Genius Number Starter Kit, and then the Little Genius Starter Kit that introduces letters. So we did this a great deal with our kindergarten students. It also helped our students, our moderate to severe students who were still struggling with number sense, and they gained confidence by working on these skills with our younger students, especially the younger students in intervention that they already had somewhat of relationships with. Now, my project timeline. This is what we started. This was the idea of our timeline, and then we'll talk about the reality of it and what happened throughout the year. So, the equipment was ordered, and the moderate to severe students assisted with Halloween candy at school to start building those relationships. And then in November, the equipment was given to the Lego students, and the Lego students began to work with the moderate to severe students. And we'll talk about how that happened and how that became really interesting as far as social interaction. In December, the moderate to severe students, along with their assistants from the Lego team, began with, we thought we were going to begin with Artie, but we had a different plan. And then the Wonder Robot will be introduced, and the students began in January and February. The students began the Osmos Genius, and in March and April, our moderate to severe students at this point were taking more of a lead role. And then we are working on for May some coding races with our Lego robots to celebrate the end of the year. So that's our year is coming very closely to an end. So that will happen here soon. Now that was what was projected, what we thought would happen. Now let's look at the project implementation, what really happened. In the fall of 2021, COVID outbreaks were consistent high numbers in our school. So it limited full implementation to the second semester. And then I had a breakout case of COVID in the fall and was not consistently in my classroom till the end of the semester. So my COVID diagnosis and subsequent hospitalization, coupled with some health problems within the SPED department, and the ability to have coverage of our students, hampered our ability to be able to consistently implement. I had some great co-teachers that helped me with this to finally get it implemented while I was still sick. During that time, our older students assisted with leading groups of kindergartners. This also encouraged them to try the robotics club. And you can see here, this was one of our first, since we couldn't get the voice activated robots, this was our first implementation. Our first coding project was with the coding critters. Coding critters are for our younger students. We started this actually with some of our preschoolers, and our kindergartners that are in the intervention group. So what happens is there's a Coding Critters book, and the students use the top of our little dog, Coder, to be able to follow the story within the book. The book outlines the coding with the dog paws and gives it different directions for Coder to follow so that the students can code and use directions that Coder and the story have been giving them. So it was great. It introduced the kids to the idea of coding in kindergarten, and they loved taking Coder on his adventures. But one of my moderate to severe students who's on the autism spectrum actively participated in the Robinson Robotics Club. He knew of coding and was active in coding in his life, but didn't have the confidence to try it. So we encouraged him, after trying some of our small coding activities, to become a participant. And you can see him toward the back of this picture. Once I was back full time, after our Coding Critters were finished, we started implementing with our first graders and some of our second graders the ARTI 3000. This actually starts the kids on line coding. They are given this code cues, and with the assistance of some of our robotics team, we line code, and they started with shapes. And line by line, they coded Artie to draw, who has pins that go up here. They taught and coded Artie to draw a square. So this introduces just a little bit higher level of coding, and our first graders loved it. And then also you can see in the picture down here, working with the members, we did Artie, but this is also another student that's in my intervention group. And he was able to learn to use what we were learning in our intervention groups to be more confident and be able to mainstream into some coding that was with the Challenger Center in his classroom. So when we returned for the second semester, COVID numbers coupled with weather hampered our ability to can have consistent time in the classroom. In mid-February, we began implementing the Osmos program, which uses an iPad and a dock. You can see down here. This was one of my students working with the Osmos kit, the coding kit. This was a second grader working on the coding kit. This works with the iPad, and the students began using coding tiles to be able to code robots and different things within the Osmos kit. And we also were able to, using the iPads that were purchased in our grant, we were also able to stretch this into 4th and 5th grade intervention groups as well. Here's some of the crossovers that happened. Our schools had a very much lack of STEM in our programs, mainly in kindergarten and first. And so this program opened our minds to engineering and other links that can assist our little Bluejays in opening their minds to design and problem solving. So initially, some of our lower primary staff members were hesitant or were already implementing STEM but didn't realize that they were doing so, especially with our stories and our reading classes, that there were STEM connections that we were partially using, but we really explored them with some of the things with this grant. Um, so with that, our students, you can see here during Read Across America Week, students were asked to create their own truffula trees and design a sturdy truffula tree holder for how the truffula trees would stand up, how we were going to save the trees. And this is a kindergartner who was successful in being able to make his trees stand up. And then down in the corner, one of my students, one of my moderate to severe students, one of my older students, became very interested in coding, and he's also quite interested in the local news. So, as we were exploring career paths for him as he was beginning to transition to high school, his love of coding and engineering led us to tour WYMT and see the intricacies of doing an actual local news broadcast while also looking at the engineering of it and the STEM parts and coding and the various technical jobs that it takes to put on these 6 o'clock news that he likes to watch with his grandparents. So, was our project a success? We began the semester with 7 students that had come back in person after 18 months. So they had not been in the classroom for 18 months. 2 of these students were encouraged to participate in the robotics club. One of them became confident enough to stick with the program and actually competed with our robotics team. They became active builders he became an active builder within the robotics club, and they were actually featured on a KVEC video and the KVEC TikTok, which was very exciting for them. I heard a lot about I'm TikTok famous now. I was on TikTok with KVEC. Okay, and our students began using their social skills that they learned in social groups and that were being consistently instructed prior to the pandemic and through virtual instruction, and became more confident in exploring our social groups with our primary students. By mid-April, just recently, only one of my students was still in the virtual academy. The students were asking their parents if they could come back so that they could do the robots. We were able to send some of our creators home with our students, especially Artie got to take a trip to one student's house so that he could continue doing some of the coding. We did Google Meets to be able to continue the coding and also use it as a reward for completed work and completed assignments and showing up to Google Meet. It also, as I spoke previously, has opened up a career path for one of our 8th graders who's transitioning to high school. Before this project, the STEM pathway, robotics pathway that they have at Perry Central, he felt like that was not reachable for him. And now, through the confidence of this grant as well as the robotics club, he feels that he can do that and has the confidence to be able to do that. He's still struggling with some of the social aspects and interactions, but he has become more confident in the building and coding. So where do we go from here? The increased student engagement has led to relationship building among the students in my school. During the pandemic, students were told that we need to stay in our lane and we need to be concerned about interacting with each other. This has been a way to tiptoe into social relationships and building confidence among our students. So coding will continue. The robotics club is growing to include some younger students, and I will be assisting with that. And then it has encouraged our primary teachers to add more STEM to their lessons. And they see now that it's attainable and that we are doing STEM and we didn't see all the STEM possibilities in reading. You see it in math, but in reading and seeing that we can use things like our coding critters and just small things that we can be STEM heroes with. So now I would just like to thank KVEC for this great opportunity for my students. We're now confident in STEM, and we're also confident that we can interact with with the students in our school, and that we have something to give to our community as well. So if you have any questions about how I did my project, my email's down on the bottom. You can just email me, and I'll help you any way you can, because implementing STEM with our severe students is something that we need has really been a benefit to my students, and given them the confidence to be able to use our social skills and work among peers in a more effective way than we had in the past. So thank you, KVAC.